There's lots of industrial pollution. And there's no question there's some kind of connection between the way we live and the way we think, and that there are many ways in which the way we're doing it are unsustainable and are also not making people happy. So I completely agree with those comments. I want to try and offer some of my thoughts that may or may not be useful to you folks, but about how I, as a sort of inject science into my thinking. So the comments about the way people's minds might be controlled and so on. So first of all, it's absolutely true that lots of, especially very specific, complicated, big organic compounds, these are things with lots of atoms, complicated things, can affect the way our brains work. No doubt about it whatsoever, and we're learning more about it all the time. And there's no question that people might seek to do that for purposes that were good or ill. That's the way people are. People have instincts that are good or ill. But I want to pick up, I'm not trying to just pounce on something, but I want to pick up something because I think, to me, and that may be just the world I live in, I see people as, complicated, mixed emotions and mixed motives, and they're certainly good and ill and so on. But I do believe there's a sort of physical reality out there. That's, I guess, what you believe if you're a scientist. And I think that that's been built up over thousands of years of people trying to not fool themselves. To me, that's the essence of what science is. And so there's some things we're pretty sure about. I mean, sure about the level of, thousands of people working for the whole century in this kind of amazingly open process, which is called science, or actually many centuries. And throughout many cultures and so on. And so, for example, it is it is just a fact of nature, as much as it's a fact of nature that things fall, that a ELF radiation, these very long, low-frequency radio waves, cannot alter the way a particular itty-bitty chemical works in your blood. That's not to say people couldn't put chemicals in your blood, do mind control. They sure could. I'm not saying they are, but there's no question that's possible. I'm just talking about what's possible and what's not. There's no question that you can heat people up with low-frequency radiation. It's basically like a big microwave. But for reasons that are really basic physics, go back to Maxwell's equations, so 1890s physics, that, I mean, if it's wrong, our whole understanding of the universe is wrong, and maybe it is, but this is a deep shared understanding. You just can't take one of these very, very big radio waves, and from like really undergraduate physics, there's nothing you can do to a small chemical. There's no way to kind of specifically turn on a chemical. And that's from my point of view, that's just a fact. So when I sort of sort this out, I think to myself, yes, you're certainly right that governments might be, well, so first of all, do governments want their citizens to be passive? Oh yeah. Are there incentives in the way our government system is put together that connect up the complicated linkage between corporations and various citizens groups and the government? Are there ways in which it's to the advantage of lots of people to have people passive? Of course. Are there ways that they achieve that? Yes, I'd say. I don't think it's a big conspiracy, but to me, television and radio and lots of the way we hold political debates are basically ways to avoid talking about the big issues in our society, and so they're very effective ways to keep people passive. So I guess one thing that I just I'll start rambling for a second. When I hear these things, one of the things I do is I don't regard any motive of people as impossible. People have an unbelievable range of motives, including enormously wonderful altruistic motives and enormously evil motives. So there's nothing you can tell me about some corporate or government person that I'll say is impossible, because I believe essentially any motives are possible. But there are things I hear that I just believe are impossible by physics. So it can't be that you could put a chemical in somebody and expose them to some very low frequency radio wave and somehow turn it on or affect it. As far as I know, that can't be any more than it can't be that people can teleport or walk through walls. For what it's worth, that's, so that's where we're coming from a different place. I don't put the yet in. Sure. I truly believe in the basics of physics as describing the world right from the experiments we have. And that means that some sorts of thing, like not conserving energy, are just not possible. Mm-hmm. You guys
that's
are free.
Known physics. You'd have to say you're speaking from what is known physics.
Of course,
right.
But there's ways.
Which is always being discovered.
Well, there's actually been really no changes to these fundamental things for 100 years or so. There aren't any big new discoveries in the sort of core bits of physics I'm talking about. And we have very sensitive checks that would be sensitive to if there was any new physics.
Welcome to my world soon.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, but the bottom line is, yes, I'm talking about as we know it now.
Right.
But it's important to say, unlike the way we know some things, these things, there are only a very small number of core physical laws. So the laws that basically define electromagnetism, there's 4 equations. There haven't been any more invented for 100 years. They work, they allow us to predict all sorts of incredible things, from the way these radios work to the way the lightning storms on Jupiter work. It's all the same 4 equations. Maybe you will find a 5th, but there's actually ways in which we can do internal tests that make it very, very unlikely there is any. So that's just, that's how physicists view the world. Maybe it sounds naive, but that's how I view it. And
it sounds like an academic's point of view. Yeah.
It sounds like a perspective.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, everything's a perspective. I don't think it's particularly academic. Lots of science isn't academic. Indeed, a lot of it hasn't been and isn't. I'm a deep, what I call realist and scientist. It's a scientific perspective.
Thank you. I appreciate
Yeah.
you expressing that.
And that's, I mean, you're absolutely true. I mean, a lot of what you said, so again, I sort stuff in sort of, like, what you said about putting your hands and stuff, and that was actually beautifully described. I mean, you're right, your bodies are permeable to stuff, and it's true that we don't understand the implications of all these chemicals. But to circle back to chemtrails, if I wanted to, again, I try and think with like hypothesis, I try and put together a chain in my mind and say, could this make sense? If I wanted to do something to do with mind control, I know from the science and physics I know that that has to be big, complicated molecules. It's very rare that single elements do anything, basically because they're in nature. So there's no way that alumina is going to be an important mind control agent because it's so common on the Earth's crust. So humans would have evolved around it.
But you're looking at all these things on an individual basis.
Well, I don't know any other way to look at them.
Well, mix in hard, mix in all these other.
Okay, but let me just continue how I think about it. Let me just continue. Let me just finish. Let me just finish. So, let me just turn this around. If you hired me and said, okay, I'm going to direct a program doing mind control, I would think about the complicated pharmacochemistry of the way people's brains work. I would engage a bunch of brain scientists to try and figure out the very specific chemicals that can influence emotions and behavior. And from really basic physics, it's clear all those things are going to be very specific big chemicals, because the way the brain works is the way proteins work is they've got funny shapes, they fit together. That's how biology works. And so you need these funny shaped big things to work as neurotransmitters or whatever it is. And so it's pretty certain off the bat that no single regular chemical element that's a common constituent in Earth's crust is going to be what you want. And also, all these big funny things are denatured by heat. Right? Proteins are cooked. That's what cooking is. So you need a way to introduce them to people's bodies. Again, just suppose that I'm hired to do mind control. The last thing I do is spray huge quantities of stuff from airplanes. This is where I just think part of this, from my point of view, just finish, just tell you how I think, just doesn't add up in any way that makes sense. I'm not saying, this, remember, so far I've just talked about science. I'm not saying anything about motives. I'm saying, let's suppose you want to do mind control. I would look to getting it, you got to get it into a route that gets it to people. You can't heat it up. It's going to be some complicated, organic chemical, because that's what our brains are made out of, and that's what they respond to. And you got to find a way to get it in. I would do it through food or water, but I wouldn't do it by spraying alumina from aircraft.
Directly affects through the water cycle.
Sure, I'm just trying to say what's the easiest way. So in principle, I could spray the proteins from aircraft, but stuff eats proteins, they rot. You got to have huge numbers of them. You want to deliver little amounts to people. You want to do it.
That's because you don't know. Perhaps, and we all don't know the mechanisms that might be in place and able to do this. It's just it could be an unknown science. I mean, that's happened before.
Well, actually, that's science. So there isn't much unknown science, and here's why. Science is inherently